whether foolish or not, it is a feature of the new plan that there will not be U.S. government capability to put people in space. Now, as a matter of national strategic posture and purpose, national position in the world, I consider this to be regrettable. I think our space program does provide strategic, our civil space program does provide strategic value for the United States and our partners and allies as members of Western society. I think it's important that we continue to do that, and abandoning our capability to do the most basic functional thing one can imagine in that context, putting your own people into space, to abandon that capability, I think is strategically unwise. Leaving aside issues of global posture and strategy, we have, in fact, as best I could tell after having folks do as careful an accounting as I could, we spent, and you hear all kinds of numbers turned around, but by the time the space station is fully and finally deployed, we will have spent about $55 billion in 05 dollars, and our partners will have spent about 20. Now, you'll hear all kinds of numbers tossed around, but that was the best number I could get. I don't certify that it's accurate, because much of what went on in the 90s, frankly, we just simply could not trace. That's a fact. Much of what went on in the 90s, we just really couldn't trace that accurately. But I think we spent, as a nation, about $55 billion on the station and about another 20 from our partners. So that's a $75 billion asset of the human race. It's not the space station that it could have been had it been designed without the constraint of the shuttle to lift it. It's not the space station that certainly many of us would have wanted, but we have it, and it is of more value, in my view, than not having it. And to build it and then not support it and not utilize it to the fullest possible extent of what we as human beings from 15 countries can get from it is foolish, when the cost of so doing is, $2 or $3 billion a year after spending 75, and making it the centerpiece of our space policy of ourselves and our partners for 25 years. But with the current policy, our utilization of the space station is restricted to our capability to buy seats and cargo space for the foreseeable future from partners. I consider that to be poor planning. I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say about it. It has nothing to do with global strategy. It has to do with sound technical and logistical and financial planning. Other issues with reliance solely upon commercial capability exist. What if there is an accident? The cost of spaceflight is very high. The collateral damages from accidents, whether they carry cargo or people, even worse, are very high. We have seen this over and over again. I myself have participated in more failure reviews than I can count. I've led one or two. And of course, like the rest of you here, or many of the rest of you here, I've lived through 3 human spaceflight accidents as an adult and seen the collateral damage that results. It's not going to be substantially different because a human spaceflight accident is caused by a commercial party as opposed to a government enterprise. The consequential damages could easily exceed the net worth of even a sizable company. So I have to ask, from a capability point of view, if the United States government, as a matter of policy, relies upon a commercial provider to provide a human spaceflight service, delivery service, and there is an accident, how does the provider stay in business? How does the U.S. government continue to get its requirements met if the provider shrugs and says, the damages are worth more than my company, I'm done? Many will say that the answer to that is, well, the government should indemnify the commercial provider. Well, I have a word or two on that in a moment. If there are commercial providers or providers, we would be very fortunate to have more than one or at most 2, given the size of the market. How does the U.S. government, how does the taxpayer protect itself against monopoly pricing? I'm often assured that commercial providers would automatically cost less than government service. But if I'm a commercial provider and there is no government competitor, I'm led to ask why I should offer you a price that would be lower than that the government could do. And if I'm on the taxpayer side of the equation and I am being asked to provide a price or a cost higher than that the government cost would be, why should I subsidize you? If you're a commercial provider and you can't beat the government deal, I mean, that's crazy. So why is there a threat from a government provider of human spaceflight services by putative commercial providers? If you can't beat the government deal, you shouldn't be in business, and if you can beat the government deal, I ought to get the best deal that you can make as an American taxpayer. So how do we protect ourselves from monopoly pricing? I don't have the answer to that unless there is some competition. The other thing, of course, is we don't have any of these commercial providers yet. What if it doesn't happen? What if it turns out to be harder than people thought? Gee, that's never happened to me. Something turned out to be harder to develop than I thought. I'm shocked. If there's a government capability, then we're okay. We can try again with commercial providers. If there's not a government capability, then we continue to buy from Russians. So I would ask, further, how is it a commercial enterprise if the government is providing upfront money, if the only market that is currently foreseen of any size is a government market, and if the government has to indemnify the company against egregious losses in order to keep the company in business? I actually ran a commercial company at one point in my career. I would have been happy to have any of those three conditions, not all of them, never mind all of them. But exactly how is it a commercial enterprise when it's a government market with upfront government money and government indemnification against loss? That tastes to me like what we call a prime contract, or more technically, a negotiated contract with industry, which is what the government uses to accomplish government purposes, to accomplish public purposes, when there is no existing market. And there's nothing at all wrong with those. I've spent my life on one side or another of government prime contracts. It's what we as a society use to accomplish certain purposes. Now, it can be done well or it can be done poorly. But as a contractual instrument, there's nothing wrong with it. But what is being asked for by putative commercial providers today smells to me like, I want to be a government prime, I just want you to call me commercial. And I frankly don't approve. I think we have to ask ourselves, what do we think the role is of a national space program and a national space agency? I think the Congress of the United States actually thought that out quite well 50-plus years ago and when the Space Act was authored. It's an interesting document to read even today. I have a copy of it on my hard drive. I would urge you who have not read it to read it. I think the purposes that are outlined for a national space program in the 1958 Space Act speak to us today across 52 years. There's nothing wrong with what it said to do. We seem to have lost sight of the fact that that is still the law. In that vein, we seem, as I said earlier, to be setting up for an adversarial position between government enterprises and commercial enterprises, something I think which would serve us extremely poorly if it were allowed to continue, and which we don't do in any other area. It's fully understood that the majority of government people and government cargo travel by means of purchasing tickets or bills of lading on commercial airlines. A friend of mine and Becky's is an American Airlines pilot who has had duty in the Air Force Reserve flying cargo to Iraq on commercial carriers. Government accomplishes a lot of government purposes by buying commercial space. But if the shooting gets hot in Iraq again, or if a commercial provider wants too much money, or if, there is still military airlift command. The government does not choose, when strategic purposes are at stake, The government does not choose to give